Welcome to the fantasy audiobook, Konoha, Creating Infinite Bloodline from Daily Settlement. Chapter 21. It is actually a very troublesome thing for Nawaki to go to the battlefield at this age. I won't say much about his own identity. Konoha is not at the level of the Third Ninja World War. In the First Ninja World War, Konoha's foundation was not reduced too much. The biggest loss was the death of the second-generation Hokage Senju Tobirama, and some normal war losses. During the Second Ninja World War, Konoha first produced 3 ninjas, and many other talents emerged, ensuring Konoha's advantage during the war. This advantage is not just talk. Under almost 3-line combat, Konoha still did not show too much decline. This is Konoha's foundation. For example, there are many strong people who can influence the situation of the war, such as the 3 ninjas and White Teeth. Konoha at this time is not to say that there are many, but there are still some, not to mention that there are many elite ninjas and even ninjas, ensuring that the war situation is not chaotic. So in this case, Konoha really doesn't need to send young people to the battlefield. After all, it is not as difficult as the Third Ninja World War. Especially since Nawaki's identity is not ordinary, it is even more difficult to arrange. In desperation, Sarutobi Hiruzen could only arrange for Rope Tree to follow Orochimaru to the battlefield so that he could be taken care of. By the way, Ishigami Hara was also among the reinforcements on the front line. Rope Tree was difficult to arrange, so Ishigami Hara did not have so many concerns. Especially since it was Ishigami Hara who took the initiative to propose it, Sarutobi Hiruzen naturally arranged him to Orochimaru, and he also had the idea of using Ishigami Hara as Rope Tree's bodyguard. Don't talk about how special Ishigami Hara's current identity is. After all, Ishigami Hara is still just taking advantage of Uzumaki Mito's last will, and naturally he can't reach the status of Rope Tree. Little boy, don't be scared to the point of peeing your pants on the battlefield. Uchiha Izuna never misses any opportunity to attack or make fun of Ishigami Hara. After all, in his opinion, such a novice will certainly not be used to the battlefield, and then he will naturally have his place. Speaking of which, Uchiha Izuna has complicated feelings about Ishigami Hara. He is envious of his talent and confused about his current situation, but more of him still wants to win him over to the Uchiha clan. The existence of Konoha is extremely dazzling to him. Every time he sees everything in Konoha, it always reminds Uchiha Izuna of his and the Uchiha clan's failures, and even his eldest brother Uchiha Madara agreed to cooperate with the Senju clan to create Konoha after his death, which made him feel inexplicably betrayed. But the reality now is that he is a dead man, living in the body of this little devil Ishigami Hara, and he can't change anything at all, which makes Uchiha Izuna seem very unwilling. Therefore, every conversation with Ishigami Hara is also a test made by Uchiha Izuna. Ishigami Hara knows all this, but he doesn't care at all, because now Ishigami Hara, who was in charge of the chakra control, was fully confident that he could control Uchiha Izuna. Apart from anything else, the multiple seals he had cast on himself had completely sealed off Uchiha Izuna's soul. By the way, Uchiha Izuna was brought here through Ishigami Hara's One Dream ability. Although the specific effect of this ability has not been fully understood, it seems that this ability is naturally able to restrict Uchiha Izuna. Otherwise, the two would not have gotten along so harmoniously during this period of time. After all, during this period, Uchiha Izuna did not think about controlling Ishigami Hara, but every time Uchiha Izuna was about to make a move, Ishigami Hara could restrict his chakra with just a thought and eat it up. After all this time, Ishigami Hara already knew how to restrict Uchiha Izuna. Now he no longer has the situation of inadvertently leaking his chakra when Uchiha Izuna first possessed him, so no one would have thought that there was actually a deceased Uchiha on his body. Thank you for your concern, but these are not your concerns. Ishigami Hara's response was still calm. Humph, little brat, don't cry when the time comes, I won't help you anymore. Uchiha Izuna would naturally not be happy, but now all he can do is just this kind of verbal sarcasm. In this regard, Ishigami Hara is not affected at all. The people on this trip include Ishigami Hara, Orochimaru, Nawaki, and a team of Jonin, a total of 7 people. The Jonin team is led by a senior Jonin, Ino, Shikaku, and Cho, and the configuration of the team is luxurious. Ishigamihara is not sure whether this is the same as the original plot, but Ishigamihara has been very vigilant along the way. After all, it is a war. After leaving the village, you may encounter danger at any time. Especially in the team, there is Naoki, who has a special identity. People exist. Ishigamihara doesn't think that other villages won't leave spies in Konoha, but if you pay more attention, the news that Naoki is going to the front battlefield can't be hidden. So, there is a high probability of being ambushed along the way. Not only Ishigamihara understands this, Orochimaru naturally guessed it a long time ago, and it is probably based on this that he transferred such a special team of Jonin to his side. Naoki is very excited, as if he can show his skills as soon as he arrives at the front line, and in excitement, it is inevitable that he will act impulsively. I think to use Orochimaru's words to evaluate, it should be, Naoki, you are very brave. Don't be impulsive. Ishigamihara once again stopped Naoki from rushing forward, and said calmly, just follow the established plan and don't do anything out of the ordinary. Only Ishigamihara could say this directly. You fool. Naoki was naturally unhappy. Ishigamihara had stopped him several times along the way. This is the land of fire, you are too cautious. Shengshu said. Ishigamihara didn't say much, and then glanced at Orochimaru, who looked normal. Do you see that way? The stone protozoan pointed to a large rock in front of it. What's wrong? What's the problem? Shengshu was puzzled. A good ambush location. Haven't you figured it out yet? Just now on our route, I didn't need to do much. I just needed to set up a trap below and bury a few detonating tags. As long as someone passed by, they would explode instantly, Ishigamihara said. As soon as he finished speaking, Orochimaru and the others' expressions changed slightly. They were already alert enough, but obviously because they had just left the village not long ago, they didn't think there would be any problems on this road. White eyes. Hyuga clan's Jonin Hyuga Toru looked at Oishi, and then cold sweat oozed from his forehead. Lord Orochimaru, there is indeed a trap there, and Hinata Tetsuya hesitated to speak, but he obviously discovered something. Orochimaru didn't waste any words. He raised his hand and waved. The Nara clan ninja among the three people, Ino, Shikaku and Cho, immediately stood out from the crowd and appeared on the big rock in a flash. Looking down from a high place, he soon found clues behind the big rock. Seeing this, Ishigamihara didn't feel surprised. Instead, he looked at Naoki with interest. The meaning was already very clear. You guy. Naoki was scared at first, but after meeting Ishigamihara's eyes, he became angry. You weren't thinking of rushing over just now, were you? Ishigamihara didn't give him any face at all and asked directly. Shut up. Naoki's face flushed. Behind the big rock, the Nara family ninja had returned, holding more than 10 detonating tags that had not yet been activated. Seeing this, Orochimaru's face immediately turned cold and he looked at Hinata Tetsuya. The latter said, I didn't see anyone ambushing. The Nara family ninja was called Nara Shikishin, and he frowned when he heard this. Lord Orochimaru, our route forward has been exposed. Hearing this, the others also reacted. Orochimaru's face suddenly became even uglier. The route of their group is fixed. Because it is a period of war, every time they go to the front line, they need to take a specific route. And such a route, except for the people present, not many people know about it. After all, Orochimaru is leading the team, and there is a person with a special identity like Naoki, so it needs to be kept secret. Ishigamihara had some guesses in his heart, and Uchiha Izuna was even more sensitive, and sneered directly, haha, someone in the Konoha high level wants to take action against that kid. No need for him to say it. After Nara Shikishin finished speaking, Ishigamihara subconsciously placed his suspicion on Shimura Danzo. This guy has a dark style of doing things, and because he missed the position of Hokage in the First Ninja World War, he has remembered it until now, and it has almost formed an obsession. Others are okay. No matter how you look at it, this matter seems to be inseparable from Shimura Danzo. After all, if you count the entire upper echelons of Konoha, only Shimura Danzo has this motive. Apart from anything else, as the grandson of the first Hokage, Naoki will definitely be a strong competitor for the position of Hokage as long as he grows up. And Naoki's identity can naturally win the love of the villagers. Compared with other people, Naoki has all the advantages here. Combined with the ending of Naoki in the original plot, he was killed by the detonating talisman, which means that he had no doubt that he would encounter danger on the way. Even if Naoki is so thick-skinned, he should still be vigilant, but he just died so simply, and no one would believe that there was no strangeness in it. What's more, the ending of Naoki in the original plot is more than that. Even the insides of his body were emptied out, and there are many things to say about this. Who wants to kill him? And he uses this method. It must be someone who knows Naoki very well who would have such an idea. After all, as a member of the Senju clan and the grandson of the first generation, if he inherits the first generation's powerful recovery ability, would the detonating talisman alone be unsafe? Some things are not even 3 taels when they are not weighed, but they can't stop 1,000 pounds when they are weighed. It's really terrifying to think about it. Based on this, Ishigami had reason to suspect that Shimura Danzo must have played a very disgraceful role in this matter. Thinking further, in the original plot, Orochimaru must have noticed something because of this incident, but because there is no evidence, he might even cast his suspicion on the entire Konoha high level, including the third-generation Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. Following this line of thought, Orochimaru and Sarutobi Hiruzen are alienated, and Naoki's death is the fuse. After all, with the relationship between Sarutobi Hiruzen and Shimura Danzo, it is hard for Orochimaru, who is close to him, to not know some secrets. Thinking of this, Ishigamihara looked at Naoki with a bit of pity. You guy, that's enough. Naoki couldn't help it anymore. When he came down, he saw Ishigamihara with a cold face in front of him, and he looked at him from time to time. The key point was that the look made him very uncomfortable. Pity, ridicule, maybe all of them. In short, Naoki's self-esteem was at work, and he wanted to find someone to fight at this time. Orochimaru said, Mr. Tetsuya, I'd like to trouble you to find the person. Hinata Tetsuya nodded. Yes, I will find a way. Orochimaru's face had completely turned cold at this moment. It was obvious that he had thought of something. His narrow eyes narrowed slightly, and then he said to the others, Everyone, keep this matter to yourself and don't tell anyone. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. Everyone responded. In fact, even without Orochimaru's words, anyone with a brain could sense that something was wrong. They didn't dare to think too deeply about this matter, especially since it involved the grandson of the first generation, Naoki, which made people feel that there was something fishy behind it. Hyuga Toru had also fully stimulated the potential of his Byakugan, with veins bulging around his eye sockets as he carefully examined every detail around him. Seeing that he was wearing a forehead protector, Ishigami had reason to believe that this was a ninja from the Hyuga branch family, but no matter whether it was a branch family or a main family, being able to become a Jonin already represented his talent. In particular, the Hyuga clan was the best in the ninja world in terms of wide area insight, and was most adept at doing such things. Found it again, Hinata Tetsuya said, and then pointed in a direction. There are traces of the enemy in the woods there. Orochimaru said nothing and went in that direction. Everyone quickly followed him and entered the woods. They soon found the traces, which were a few grass stalks that had been stepped on. It was hard to find them if you didn't look carefully. The clues were basically cut off here. It was obvious that the enemy had been prepared. Unwilling to accept this, he was particularly angry when he thought about how he had narrowly escaped danger. He was not completely ignorant, especially after this incident. He obviously thought of something bad, and naturally wanted to find the real culprit. Seeing this, Ishigamihara shook his head slightly, and then took the initiative to say, Let me try. Orochimaru looked over, and heard Ishigamihara say, I haven't mastered this technique yet, and I don't know if I can find it, so let's give it a try. As he spoke, he had already closed his eyes, put his hands together, and formed a seal. What Ishigamihara performed was the perception ninjutsu mastered by the Uzumaki clan, called the Kagura Heart Eye. This is a perception ninjutsu that requires the special chakra of the Uzumaki clan to work perfectly. It is called a ninjutsu, but it is actually closer to a secret technique. The reason why Ishigamihara is not yet fully proficient is because this technique has extremely high requirements for chakra, not in terms of quantity but in terms of quality. With Ishigamihara's current chakra, he can perform it, but he cannot reach the exaggerated level of sensing dozens of kilometers. It can sense a distance of about 4 or 5 kilometers. Within this distance, I dare not say that I can detect everything, but I can still get a general idea of the chakra situation. It only took a moment for Ishigamihara to open his eyes, with a slight smile on his face, and nod to Orochimaru. Found it. 4 kilometers to the northwest, there is a ninja team evacuating to the northwest. No one was surprised that Ishigamihara could sense such a long distance. After all, the miracles that happened to Ishigamihara were not many, but not few either. Especially Naoki, who exclaimed in surprise, "Have you really mastered the Kagura Heart Eye? Isn't it said that it can only be performed with the Uzumaki bloodline, and it also requires special chakra property changes?" Ishigamihara glanced at him with a strange look in his eyes. Naoki smacked his lips. "Yes, you have the blood of the Uzumaki clan, and you master the chakra property changes as easily as eating and drinking water. I almost forgot. I'll take that as a compliment." Ishigamihara shook his head slightly. Orochimaru's expression relaxed a little at this time, and he said without further ado, "Catch up with them." "Yes," everyone responded, and Shengshu immediately restrained his expression and became serious. Swoosh! Everyone disappeared in an instant and chased in the northwest direction. At the same time, 4 kilometers away, a team of 4 was moving away quickly. These 4 people in one water were dressed as ninjas from the Land of Thunder and the Hidden Rock Village. They were calm and steady. "If it weren't for that little devil, our mission would have been successful this time." One person couldn't help but speak out. "Be quiet. If you fail in this kind of thing, you fail. You can find another chance next time. Don't forget that the guy leading the team is Orochimaru. You must not let them find you." The team leader immediately scolded him, but it was obvious that he was not willing to accept the failure of this mission. After all, he had finally found the intelligence, but he didn't grasp it. No matter how he thought about it, he was unwilling to accept it. Unfortunately, there will probably not be a second chance like this. He is the grandson of Hashirama Senju. If he can be killed, it will definitely deal a big blow to Konoha's morale. Another person also spoke at the right time, and several people had similar ideas. "Captain, we should have taken action just now," someone said. The team leader looked uneasy and said in a cold voice, "This mission is top secret. Our battle with Konoha has not yet started. We should not do too much at this time. Watch Konoha and Sunagakur fight to the death, and then lure those crazy people in Kumogakure to the end. It is appropriate for us to come out at the end." At this moment, the face of the person at the end of the team changed. "Oh no, someone is catching up with us from behind," he cried out in surprise. It was obvious that this person had noticed the movement from behind, and the special ability of the ninja was clearly revealed at this time. "Speed up." The captain of the team gave the order without any hesitation, and his speed increased sharply. The other people's faces also changed drastically, knowing that if they were caught up, the end would be miserable. That was Orochimaru, who was known as the 3 ninjas in the face of the demigod Hanzo of the ninja world. Even if they were a team of Jonin, they might not be able to escape well if they met him. However, what you fear will come true, and the speed of the person chasing from behind is much faster than they imagined. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. There were several whistles, mixed with hissing sounds, and the 4 people's faces changed drastically, and scattered without a second thought. Boom boom boom. Continuous explosions sounded, and flames appeared in the area where the 4 people were just in. Swoosh. The sound of breaking through the air sounded immediately, and Orochimaru, Hinata Tetsuya and the other 4 appeared in the field, and behind them, Ishigamihara and Naoki followed far behind. The 5 people in front were chasing with all their might, and Ishigamihara stayed by Naoki's side to prevent any danger, so he and Naoki fell behind. The battle started directly. Orochimaru licked his lips, his expression was cold, and his voice was hoarse. "I see, these are the guys from Iwagakure." Seeing these 4 people, Orochimaru immediately confirmed his judgment. Someone among the Konoha high-level officials must have passed on the information about their trip. Whether it was active or passive, Orochimaru no longer needed to consider it. He just needed to make sure that someone in the village had evil intentions towards Naoki. As for whether he could capture the 4 people and obtain specific information from them, Orochimaru didn't care much. These people must have had a complete plan to come here, and even if they were captured alive, he was afraid that he would not be able to obtain any useful information. Interesting. Although he said it was interesting, Orochimaru did not hold back at all. Orochimaru's ninjutsu had already shown some signs at this time. The special ninjutsu based on snakes had an unexpected effect when dealing with this group of enemies. Perhaps these people already knew that Orochimaru was not easy to deal with, but those pythons and venomous snakes were really hard to defend against, and soon forced the four people into a disadvantageous position. You guys stop them, I'm going to kill that brat. The four members of Iwagakure were quite decisive, and seeing that the situation was not right, without any hesitation, three of them completely exploded, and with a desperate fighting style, they actually resisted the attack of Orochimaru and others in the first time. In the field, Hinata Tetsuya used soft fists to fight the enemy. Narashikishin's shadow imitation technique was very strange, and the remaining two people, one of them, Akamaikido Lai, performed the multiplication technique, and the other, Yamanaka Eijiro, assisted with the secret technique of the Yamanaka clan. The offensive was strong, but it must be said that the combat power erupted by the three members of Iwagakure under the name of product, and it is impossible for people to defeat or kill them in a short time. In any case, the three of them were able to hold on for just a few breaths, which gave another person a chance to abandon his teammates and rush in the direction where Orochimaru and others came from. Seeing this scene, Orochimaru's face immediately turned cold. Ninja technique. Snake flipping technique. Puff puff puff. Suddenly, holes appeared in the ground, and huge pythons with long snake mouths rushed out from them, easily devouring the enemies fighting with Orochimaru from all angles. In the process, the opponent also killed several pythons, but in the end he still couldn't escape death. The whole process was quite straightforward, and the rock ninja didn't have time to make the desired resistance. After doing all this, Orochimaru immediately turned around and chased after him, at a very fast speed, like an afterimage. But because of this delay, the man who had just rushed over had already met Ishigamihara and Naoki. Looking at the rock ninja with a ferocious look on his face, Ishigamihara had a blank expression, but Naoki on the side was a little nervous. But the next moment, Naoki couldn't help but widen his eyes. Ishigamihara made seals with his hands, and completed a technique almost in an instant. Water style. Water dragon bullet technique. Water condensed out of thin air under Ishigamihara's feet, turning into a water curtain, and then twisted into a water dragon, attacking the opponent. But in the eyes of Rope Tree, Ishigamihara had disappeared at this time. If you can follow his figure, you will find that Ishigamihara has appeared behind the water dragon's head at some point, waving his hands quickly, and kunai shot forward one by one, forming a fan shape. If you observe more carefully, it is not difficult to find that behind each kunai, there is an extremely hidden silk thread connecting it. After doing all this, Ishigamihara used his hands again, and completed another technique in a flash. Fire style. Dragon fire technique. He opened his mouth and spit out a blazing fire like an arrow, which was attached to the silk threads and shot forward. By this time, the Iwagakure had already reacted. He formed a seal with his hands, and his chakra surged. With a determined momentum, he actually smashed the dragon head of the water dragon bullet technique directly, and then the momentum slowed down slightly, but he still came towards the two people. What? But when this person rushed through the blockade, his pupils shrank, and he saw the blazing flames that were like sharp arrows. Hey! Ishigamihara raised his lips, and suddenly pulled the silk thread in his hand. Several flames immediately turned into fire lines, cutting towards the man. Swish, swish, swish. The rock ninja's heart sank inexplicably, and he could already hear the whistling sound of a sharp weapon cutting through the air. As far as he could see, several lines of fire were already approaching him, completely blocking the space above, below, left, and right where he was. And all this was done in an instant, but at this moment, the rock ninja was in midair, with nowhere to get leverage. Seeing that the rock ninja was about to die on the spot, this man was worthy of being a Jonin of the Hidden Rock Village, with extremely rich combat experience. At this critical moment, he instantly twisted his mind, formed seals with both hands, and spit out sharp stones from his mouth. Earth Escape 100 Explosion Technique. The stone looked like a magnified version of a Senbon, very sharp, and also whistled out. As the rock ninja twisted his body, it shot in all directions and accurately hit the several fire lines. He actually avoided the dead end in this way. But when he saw this scene, Ishigamihara's expression did not change at all. He just shook his wrist, and those fire lines surged like wave plates. At the front of the fire line, those tied kunai seemed to be stimulated by something, and their forward trajectory was affected, and then they collided with each other, making a tinkling sound. When the rock ninja heard this, he was inexplicably startled, and suddenly had a strong premonition that he was going to suffer. As the rock ninja thought, as if that was the case, a sharp whistle was heard again in his ears. It was the kunai that were meant to pass over him, but now some of them were actually shooting towards him. This feeling, Uchiha blade manipulation technique. As a veteran on the battlefield, the rock ninja knew in an instant what the man in front of him was doing. It was the Uchiha-style shuriken manipulation technique that he had fought against before. Being in mid-air, the man subconsciously glanced in the direction of Ishigamihara, but his eyes widened involuntarily. He did not see that Ishigamihara had a Sharingan. In other words, this was not Uchiha blade manipulation technique. But how is this possible? He had no time to think about it. His sufficient combat experience allowed him to still be in this 1,000-year battle. He reacted at the critical moment. Without any hesitation, it was too late to turn around again. He saw the rock ninja directly put on his vest and swung it fiercely behind him. Puff puff puff. With a few muffled sounds, the incoming kunai was blocked so easily, which seemed very light. Having been on the battlefield and experienced many battles, the rock ninja naturally knew how to avoid getting hurt. Although he just dealt with it lightly, if he did not have enough experience, he would have been in trouble. Until this moment, the crisis for this person was resolved, and he had already landed. Just by stepping on the ground with his toes, he rushed out again, and his speed was 3 times faster than before, and he attacked Ishigamihara and Naoki directly. At this time, Orochimaru was still more than 10 meters away from the two men, but the situation on the field had turned around, and danger seemed to have come to Ishigamihara. Seeing this, Orochimaru's pupils shrank slightly, and he became anxious. But just when Orochimaru thought that the two would be in danger and the Iwagami felt that he had already won, an accident happened. It cannot be said to be an accident. To be precise, it should be that the incident that Ishigamihara had planned long ago appeared. The Iwagami's face was gradually ferocious and full of murderous intent, but the next moment he caught a glimpse of Ishigamihara's upturned mouth corners and his 2 raised fingers. Inexplicably, that bad feeling appeared again, but this time the Iwagami did not have time to react. Ha! As Ishigamihara shouted softly, the place where the rock ninja had just stepped on was instantly ignited with blazing flames. Like a torch, the flames shot up into the sky. Ah! A shrill scream was heard, and the voice was full of pain. Almost in the blink of an eye, the man had turned into a fireman, and the raging flames devoured him. His fate was naturally doomed. Until this moment, Orochimaru hurriedly arrived. At this time, Naoki had also reacted and looked at Ishigamihara in great shock. At this moment, Naoki admired Ishigamihara. No one knew why he didn't take action at the first time. In fact, only Naoki himself knew that when he really faced the enemy's fierce and neat skills, and the fierce aura of the opponent when he rushed towards him, he had never really experienced it. The whole mood of Rope Tree, who was fighting, was tense. The result was that Rope Tree was frightened by the enemy's brutality and did not respond immediately. But Rope Tree would never have thought that Ishigamihara would be so straightforward and decisive, and his moves were extremely swift. With just 2 ninjutsu and ninja tools, he easily solved the enemy. Orochimaru immediately formed seals with his hands, opened his mouth and spit out several invisible air blades, which fell into the flames, making a puffing sound. The screams stopped abruptly. After doing all this, Orochimaru did not care about the unfinished battle in the field, but cast his eyes on Ishigamihara. Harukun's performance is really amazing. His excellent combat instincts coupled with the precise release of ninjutsu are the perfect battlefield art. As he spoke, he licked his lips and laughed hoarsely. If I'm not mistaken, you should have used 2 techniques when you formed the seal just now, right? Ishigami-Haru's expression was normal, and he did not change at all because of Orochimaru's praise. He was a little surprised that Orochimaru could see through his attack at such a long distance. This alone was already amazing enough. He also did not hide it, and nodded and said, "Indeed, the water dragon bullet technique has 44 seals, and I have been able to reduce it to 6 seals." Orochimaru did not wait for Ishigami-Haru to finish, and said, "Before you threw those kunai, you had already completed another technique. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the Flame Rush technique. After the Water Dragon Bullet, you also completed the seal of this technique, which was hidden underground by you early, waiting to be triggered when you completed the last step." He glanced at the fire which was gradually dying out. In the flames were several pieces of body parts, stained with flames, and the blood had long been burned clean. "So, Harakun, you have already judged the opponent's trajectory and possible actions from the beginning. Those kunai and steel wires are just traps you set up long ago, waiting for that guy to jump in automatically. What a terrible fighting talent." Shungshu's eyes widened as he listened to the conversation between the two. He only reacted through the conversation between the two. It was not until this moment that he really understood that the scene just now was exaggerated. And all of this was what Ishigami-Hara had done in a flash. Speaking of this, Shungshu looked at Ishigami-Hara, his lips trembled a few times, and finally gave his own evaluation. "You are such a freak." Ishigami-Hara just thought that this was a compliment from Naoki, and he just smiled and didn't care. Seeing that he was neither arrogant nor impatient, Orochimaru was even more satisfied. He believed that such a genius would be able to shine on the battlefield. On the other side, Hyuga Tetsuya and the Inoshika Cho team quickly dealt with the remaining two people. After all, their team of 4 could be said to be the most elite configuration among the Konoha ninja teams, and dealing with 2 enemies from Iwagakure was not a problem. Especially the cooperation between the 3 Inoshika Cho, they were more tacit than the average team, and they complemented each other more. With a senior Hyuga ninja supporting them, it was really hard for them to lose in this situation. "Lord Orochimaru, it has been resolved," Hinata Tetsuya reported. "What did you find?" Orochimaru asked. Hinata Tetsuya shook his head and continued, "It's a normal Iwagakure team. There is nothing special to discover." "Can you confirm their ID code?" Orochimaru asked again. Hinata Toru still shook his head. Seeing this, Orochimaru couldn't help but sneer. "Yes, if they dare to carry out such a mission, their identities will be kept secret. It seems that Iwagakure has many spies in the village." Hinata Tetsuya was silent for a while, and then he couldn't help asking, "Lord Orochimaru, do you want to inform the village about this matter?" Orochimaru nodded and ordered, "Inform the village of what happened here, and we don't need to worry about other things." "Yes, Lord Orochimaru." Soon, Yamanaka Eijiro in the Ino Deer Cho made seals with his hands, used the summoning technique, and summoned a ninja dog. Seeing that Ishigami-Hara seemed to be looking at him with curiosity, Yamanaka Eijiro said, "Hara-kun wants a summoned beast." "I'm just curious," Ishigami-Hara said. Yamanaka Eijiro smiled and said, "If you need it, you can go to the Inuzuka clan. Their ninja dogs are very good. If you want ninja cats, you can also contact them through the Uchiha relationship." Ishigami-Hara just nodded slightly, not surprised. Uchiha Izuna had already told him about these, but he didn't have any thoughts on summoned beasts for the time being. "Thank you for letting me know." "You're welcome. If you need anything, just contact me." As he spoke, Yamanaka Eijiro had already written the information on a scroll, and then handed it to the ninja dog, letting it carry it away. After doing all this, Orochimaru ordered, "Next, we will change the route and keep silent throughout the journey." "Yes, Lord Orochimaru." Everyone quickly dealt with the battlefield and left without staying. During the whole process, Rope Tree wanted to say something but hesitated, but Orochimaru did not give him the opportunity to speak. The silence throughout the whole process should be the time given by Orochimaru to Rope Tree to reflect on himself. It depends on whether Rope Tree can see through it. Ishigami-Hara saw that he frowned all the way, and he was obviously still immersed in the previous battle. It was obvious that Rope Tree was not satisfied with his performance, but Ishigami-Hara did not intend to explain this matter. Some things had to be figured out by himself. Uchiha Izuna's evaluation of Ishigami-Hara surprised him a little. To be honest, Ishigami never thought that he would hear praise from Uchiha Izuna. The battle just now was pretty good. These were Uchiha Izuna's original words. It was obvious that it was not easy for Uchiha Izuna to say such words. Ishigami-Hara raised the corners of his mouth and responded in his mind, "What do you mean?" HMPH. Uchiha Izuna naturally couldn't stand seeing Ishigami-Hara being complacent, and immediately snorted coldly and said, "But compared to our time, you are still far behind. Especially those 4 trash from Iwagakure, they were dealt with so easily, it's too bad." Regarding the current situation in the ninja world, Ishigamihara had naturally told Uchiha Izuna, so the latter was not completely ignorant. It makes sense. The situation in the ninja world during the Warring States period was far more cruel than it is now. It was a fight between families, a fight to the death, and there was no compromise at all. Although there are wars in the ninja world now, the environment during the period between the ninja world wars is still peaceful after all. It is said that a comfortable environment can best wear down people's hearts, and no one can deny this. Ishigamihara didn't care about this. It is true that the battles now are not as good as those in the Warring States period. This is also a reality. But I didn't expect that you could use the Uchiha-style blade-wielding technique without the help of the Sharingan. Uchiha Izuna said. Ishigami. Principal said. This thing is not difficult, it is nothing more than the operation under the coordination of hand and eye. As long as the eyesight is strong enough and the hands are not chaotic, you can do it. Humph, don't say it so lightly. Even among the Uchiha clan, there are not many who can achieve this level at your age. I will take it as a compliment. Uchiha Izuna paused. And then said, "Little boy, be careful of that man." Are you referring to Orochimaru? Ishigamihara asked with interest. Well, that man has noticed you. This guy gives me the feeling that he is not simple. Upon hearing this, Ishigamihara smiled. It should be said that he is a famous strong man in the Warring States period. Even if he is dead, his keen insight is extremely remarkable. Orochimaru is indeed not simple. Even if he is not at the snake uncle stage now, his talent cannot be denied. I will be careful, I don't think he will have any bad intentions towards me. Ishigamihara said. Humph, then I don't care, kid, don't die on the battlefield. The Uchiha clan's arrogant temperament is fully reflected in Uchiha Izuna. However, Ishigamihara inexplicably felt that he might have some unexpected gains on the battlefield this time. The western part of the river country has now become a battlefield. Since the First Ninja World War, the 5 major countries in the ninja world have tacitly placed the battlefield in the small countries adjacent to each other, and have not affected their own land. Whether it is the river country, the rain country, or the grass country, their positioning in the Ninja World War is the same. This can be regarded as the natural sadness of small countries. Ishigamihara looked at the dilapidated environment around him, frowned slightly, and did not have too many feelings. This kind of thing was so in the past life and in this life. No matter which world, war will always bring only destruction and pain. Konoha Camp, where the body is built as a whole, there are patrolling ninjas everywhere, and the guard force is even more spread over dozens of kilometers. It can be said that water cannot be poured in. The frontline commander here is none other than Hitaki Tsukumo, who is known as the White Fang of Konoha. This person became famous in the early days of the Second Ninja World War. After entering the battlefield, he quickly showed his talents and soon showed extremely high talents on the battlefield. In the battle with Sand Village, he even had the feat of killing the enemy leader several times. So, when Iwagakure was about to be defeated, Hitaki Tsukumo took over the responsibility of commanding the front line. So far, the effect is remarkable, and the front line has been pushed forward more than 10 kilometers, approaching the mainland of the Wind Country. Ishigamihara met Hitaki Tsukumo in a large combat tent. The latter is still very young, about the same age as Orochimaru, with white hair and high spirits. Tsukumo-kun. Orochimaru was the first to greet him. Hitaki Tsukumo smiled when he saw the newcomer, and then he saw Ishigamihara and Naoki beside Orochimaru, and especially when his eyes fell on the latter, his brows unconsciously frowned. Why did the village send out Mr. Rope Tree? Obviously, the arrival of Mr. Rope Tree made Hitaki Tsukumo feel pressured immediately. This is a point that is easy to think of. If there is any accident with Mr. Rope Tree, it will be a blow to those who know his identity, more or less, which is not a good thing. Orochimaru just laughed hoarsely. Young people always have to grow up, and Mr. Rope Tree also needs to shine, doesn't it? Mr. Hitaki. Tsukumo nodded slightly, and then said, that's true. After all, he is the grandson of the first generation. He dares to come to the battlefield. This courage is not bad. Being talked about. Mr. Ropetree just grinned, and this smile is still very contagious. Orochimaru said again. I also brought a genius, whose talent surpasses everyone. Ishigami Hara's face was calm, neither sad nor happy. Mr. Hitaki Tsukumo naturally noticed him, but did not ask, waiting for the next word. Then he heard Orochimaru introduce. This is Ishigami Hara, a little younger than Mr. Ropetree, but with a strong fighting instinct. In my opinion, this kid's fighting ability may not be inferior to Tsukumo-kun. To get such an evaluation from Orochimaru, it is enough to see how much Orochimaru values Ishigami Hara. So, Hitaki Tsukumo was naturally curious, and couldn't help but look at Ishigami Hara twice. He was surprised to find that the other party did not react when facing his sight, and even looked directly at him. You know, Hitaki Tsukumo is an elite jonin, and a frontline commander. He killed countless enemies on the battlefield and had a sharp temperament. It was surprising enough that a young man could perform like this under his naturally revealed momentum. Very good, how about handing him over to me? Hitaki Tsukumo couldn't help but ask. Orochimaru didn't expect Hitaki Tsukumo to say this, but shook his head and said, that won't work, he is the teammate specially arranged by the teacher for Naoki-kun. Hearing this, Hitaki Tsukumo immediately understood that the boy in front of him said that he was Naoki's teammate, but in fact, he could be regarded as a safety guarantee for Naoki. Being valued so much by the Hokage, Hitaki Tsukumo has completely believed in the talent of the boy in front of him, so he became even more curious. Does Lord Hokage have any orders? Hitaki Tsukumo was not surprised to be rejected by Orochimaru, and simply changed the subject. Orochimaru said, because there is movement on the Iwagakure side, we need to respond in advance. The teacher means that we must complete the strategic goals as soon as possible and completely overwhelm the Sunagakure to share the pressure brought by the Iwagakure side. Hitaki Tsukumo nodded and said, I understand, next I will adjust the tactics and strive to put the Sunagakure side into a passive position in the shortest time possible. Well, do this as soon as possible, I need to take them to the rain country soon. Are they going to join up with Jiraiya and Tsunade? Orochimaru said, yes, the war over there is almost over. Hanzo has decided to end the war. This demigod of the ninja world was ultimately defeated by his own arrogance. Well, with this decision made by Yugakure, the pressure there will be reduced a lot, which is a good thing. Hitaki Tsukumo smiled when he heard this. When Orochimaru was about to say something else, he heard a sharp whistle outside. Hearing the sound, Orochimaru and Hitaki Tsukumo's faces changed, and they rushed out of the tent without any hesitation. Ishigami Hara and Naoki followed quickly. The sound came from a distance, and at the same time there was a roar, and even a faint fire could be seen in the distance. There's an accident. Hitaki Tsukumo and Orochimaru immediately understood what happened. At this time, the entire camp was already in motion. Many ninjas quickly rushed to the place where the sound came from, obviously knowing that the enemy had appeared there. It looks like they are from Sand Village. They came at the right time. Orochimaru said this with a double meaning, and turned to look at Nuase, with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Seeing this, Ishigami Hara also had some thoughts. Ropetree, and Hara-kun, you stay in the camp. Orochimaru said. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. Ishigami Hara responded. I understand, teacher. Nangshu also behaved normally and was not impulsive. Perhaps because of what happened on the way here, he was somewhat less impetuous and calmer at this time. Orochimaru and Hitaki Tsukumo looked at each other, and without any hesitation, they rushed in the direction of the sound, and at the same time, there was the sound of Hitaki Tsukumo giving orders in an orderly manner. At this time, Ishigami Hara frowned. For some reason, he always felt that the sudden attack of Sand Village was a little too sudden. Could there be some secrets in it? Thinking of this, Ishigami Hara couldn't help but look at Ropetree. Chapter 31. The attack by Sand Village was very sudden, and it can be said that there was no sign of anything. Logically speaking, the camp of Konoha had been well managed, and there were patrol teams for dozens of kilometers from the camp. If there was any situation, it would be impossible that there would be no movement at all. But the reality is that the Sand Village did not know how to bypass those patrol teams, or it is possible that they directly pulled out those patrol teams. In this case, the seriousness of the matter is not small. It is obvious that the Sand Village has been prepared for this surprise attack. The hesitation was too sudden, so that the reaction of the Konoha side was somewhat delayed. In fact, it is not Konoha's fault. No one expected that Sand Village would launch a surprise attack at this time. After all, before this, Sand Village was the one who was always at a disadvantage. Most of the combat power in the camp had already gone to the place where the attack occurred. Most of the people left behind were wounded and medical ninjas, and some people also stayed behind. Ishigamihara and Naoki did not go over. The former did not think there was anything wrong, but the latter was somewhat difficult to calm down at this moment. Seeing this, Ishigamihara said, "Make preparations early." Rope Tree was startled, a little confused. Ishigamihara explained, "The Sand Village's surprise attack must be the camp. Now most of the camp's combat forces are going to resist, but the Sand Village will definitely have a backup plan." Hearing this, Rope Tree immediately understood and his expression immediately became serious. You were right. As he said that, Rope Tree had already taken out the kunai and ran in one direction. "Where are you going?" Ishigamihara asked. Naoki pointed to a corner of the camp and said loudly, "Go protect the wounded." Hearing this, Ishigamihara's mouth curled up. "Then I will go with you." After saying this, he went to the area where the wounded were. You, wait for me. There are quite a few wounded in the camp. Basically they were hid in the camp, about 40 to 50 people, and these are just those who can recover after simple treatment. Those who are seriously injured or even disabled are generally sent back to the rear or to Konoha for recuperation. With such a big commotion, the injured area has long been under martial law, and 2 teams are scattered around as guards. The arrival of Ishigamihara and Naoki can be regarded as adding some strength here. "Don't run around, I'll walk around for a while," Ishigamihara said. Naoki didn't ask what Ishigamihara was going to do, they still had a tacit understanding, just nodded. Ishigamihara had a hunch in his heart that the attack from Sunagaku wouldn't be that simple, so just in case, he naturally needed to leave some backup around. As it turned out, Ishigamihara's guess was correct. As time went on, some people from Sunagaku broke through the defense and appeared in the camp. "There are enemies here. How did they get in? Has the front been lost?" The guards in the camp were shocked, but they rushed forward to resist without any hesitation. There were not many people from the Sand Village who rushed into the camp, only about a dozen people, but each of them was not a simple character, especially the leader, who was obviously a puppeteer. Ishigamihara did not show up at the first time, but quietly observed in the dark. There were 2 leaders, a man and a woman, both of whom were puppeteers, and each had a puppet beside them. The man's puppet was a huge puppet like a gecko, with blades and thorns on the surface, and a hideous body. Next to the woman was a bat-like puppet, quietly hanging beside her. The means were very fierce. Whether it was the gecko-like puppet or the bat puppet, the lethality was extremely powerful. The former could spit fire, and a collision could cause considerable damage. The latter was an air unit, which was hard to defend against. So in this way, the defensive forces of the camp suffered heavy losses for a while. Chakra lines. So it was this kind of change in nature, with Yin-Soku chakra accounting for a large proportion. So that's it, the chakra lines are just appearances, and what really controls the puppets is the ninja's spirit. After careful observation, Ishigamihara saw the secret of the puppeteer's control of the puppets, especially the characteristics of the chakra lines, and he knew them well. Based on this, if a certain proportion of Yang-Tun chakra is added to the chakra line, it can even control the human body. Drawing inferences from this, Ishigamihara thought of the original plot where Chiyo used chakra lines to control Haruno Sakura, and immediately understood the key. The puppet must have a special core that can hold the chakra of the operator, so that the puppet can be bound to the individual and will not be controlled by others in battle. In this way, Ishigamihara also became interested in puppeteers. At this time, the defense force of the camp was already very limited. The people of Sand Village were completely aiming for total destruction, and they were also thinking of killing Konoha's living forces, so they were quite ruthless. In just a short while, they were already heading towards the area where the wounded were. The man and woman led their subordinates and came in an instant. Just as they arrived at the periphery of the wounded area, the ground in front of them suddenly exploded. "Be careful, there's a trap," the man shouted, and the puppet instantly appeared in front of him, blocking the fire. But the subordinates behind him were not so lucky. The trap left by Ishigamihara was not as simple as a simple explosion. The explosion was just a superficial phenomenon, and the real useful thing was the sealing technique. Buzz. Under the cover of the fire, countless black lines emerged, almost covering the bodies of most people behind the two men in an instant. Only a few people avoided it early. Ah! A scream was heard instantly, and it was those dark lines that condensed together almost instantly, and at the same time lifted up pieces of soil, exerting extremely strong pressure on those people, squeezing them into meat paste almost in the blink of an eye. The survivors were furious. Sealing techniques are not just about sealing chakra, some of them have considerable lethality. For example, the sealing techniques left by Ishigamihara are variants of the seal of evil, and they are mixed with several earth escape techniques and earth spears, so it is normal to have such an effect. The man and woman could not care less at this moment. The puppet controlled by the former opened its mouth, and suddenly a raging fire rushed towards the nearest tent. Wind style. Great breakthrough. With a loud shout, it was Rope Tree who jumped out from the side, stood in front of the tent, and blew out a gust of wind, blowing away the flames. The Sand Village man and woman were not surprised to see this, but the man's eyes suddenly lit up after seeing Rope Tree. Catch him. Seeing this scene, Ishigamihara narrowed his eyes slightly, and his guess really came true. From leaving the village to now, Ishigamihara has always had doubts about the situation of Rope Tree. From the first encounter to now, it seems that everything can be explained clearly. Without even thinking about it, Ishigamihara now has a reason to blame all of this on Shimura Danzo. This person may not contact Bikun blatantly, at least not in the current time period, but if he wants to pass on the news about Rope Tree, it is easy to do it, and it can be done without exposing himself. This is Ishigamihara's foresight. If it were someone else, even Orochimaru and the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, I'm afraid they wouldn't think of this. At most, they would only think that their confidentiality work was not done well. If they suspected more deeply, it was probably that there were too many spies from other villages in Konoha. As for suspecting Shimura Danzo, Orochimaru may have had some ideas, but exposing a high-level advisor without evidence is something that Orochimaru, even if he is the disciple of the third Hokage, can't do. And if it goes wrong, it will lead to revenge, which is not worth the loss. With Orochimaru's obsession with eternal life, he will definitely not expose himself to danger. In this way, we can associate the life course of Orochimaru in the original plot. Perhaps after the death of Rope Tree, he saw through the darkness of Konoha and threw himself into the darkness so that he no longer loved Konoha. In this way, his subsequent actions have an explanation, and the logic is self-consistent. However, all this is nothing to Ishigamihara, and he doesn't care about it at all. At this time, the situation shown by the male and female puppeteers after seeing Rope Tree obviously confirmed Ishigamihara's guess. It should be said that Rope Tree is worthy of being Rope Tree. Even if he is still a teenager, the identity of the grandson of the first-generation Hokage Senju Hashirama is attractive enough. So much so that the attack of Sand Village this time is inseparable from his identity. When facing these two puppeteers, Rope Tree looked nervous. After all, he is just a rookie who has just arrived on the battlefield. Facing two puppeteers at the level of Jonin, the pressure is naturally not small. Especially after hearing the words of the male puppeteer, Rope Tree's face suddenly changed, and he had a bad premonition in his heart. Click, 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 the puppet's unique mechanical amplification sound rang out, and the huge gecko puppet pounced forward like a tiger, and its abdomen suddenly opened, revealing a cavity. Upon closer inspection, there were fine sharp blades in the cavity. Obviously, if a person was put into it, the end would be miserable. The female puppeteer was controlling the bat-like puppet, and it swooped down from the air, holding both wings open, and hanging silk threads from the ends of its wings. Those were tough steel wires, and there were small hooks at the end, which were obviously used to grab the enemy. The two puppets, one above and one below, almost went towards Nuace at the same time, and there were several remaining sand ninjas on the side to support them, and Nuace's retreat was blocked in almost an instant. At this moment, Nuace was a little desperate. No matter how high his spirit was, no matter how proud he was just a genin now. Facing such a scene, it was rare that he did not become weak in fear. Without any hesitation, Rope Tree dodged sideways and barely avoided the attack of the gecko puppet. At the same time, he formed seals with his hands and opened his mouth to shoot out a large ball of flames, which directly hit the bat puppet that was swooping down from the air. Boom! The explosion sounded, and Rope Tree took advantage of this opportunity to escape from danger. However, this was only the present, and the real crisis had not left, because Rope Tree was still in the encirclement of the Sand Village at this moment. Shang Shu frowned and looked around, trying to find the weak point in the encirclement, but after looking for a while, his brows frowned even tighter. "Little ghost, come with us," the male puppeteer said in a deep voice, with a hint of joy on his face. "You are dreaming." The Rope Tree naturally did not dry up, and then the hands took it again. Earth Escape. Yellow Spring Swamp. Wah wah. Everyone felt the ground beneath their feet quickly become muddy, especially the gecko puppet, which soon sank deeply into it. HMPH. The male puppeteer snorted coldly, not caring about the changes in the field. The swamp might be able to trap the puppet for a moment, but it could not paralyze it. In his opinion, this was just a useless effort to delay time. Don't worry about hurting him, as long as he or she is fine. The male puppeteer immediately gave the order. The others suddenly grinned, and the next moment they quickly rushed towards Nawaki. Bang, 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 the hand-to-hand combat began. No, to be precise, it was the one-sided beating by the sand ninjas, who did not use powerful ninjutsu. After all, they wanted to capture Nawaki alive, and even if Nawaki would be injured, as long as he didn't die, it would be a mission accomplished for them. In this case, even though Nawaki's chakra was stronger than that of an average middle or jonin, his lack of combat experience was indeed a disadvantage. At first, he was able to resist a few times, but soon fell into a disadvantage. Shang Shu was furious and tried to form a seal several times, but was soon interrupted by the enemy. Yuan. As a last resort, Shang Shu could only shout. Shang Shu felt that he was not afraid of life and death, but in this situation, he could not let these Sand Village get what they wanted. He also knew that his identity was special. If he was really taken away by the Sand Village people, it would not be a good thing for Konoha. Here it comes. A voice suddenly sounded not far away, and everyone in Sand Village was startled. However, what surprised them even more was Rope Tree's next performance. Shang Shu only felt that his hands and feet were startled at a certain moment, and then his mobility increased at a strange level. He would always make some extraordinary movements, and he could always avoid the opponent's attack. What's going on? Shang Shu was shocked and was about to resist when he heard Ishigamihara's voice. Don't resist. Hearing this, Rope Tree felt relieved. He had absolute trust in Ishigamihara. Then, Rope Tree saw that his hands were out of control. He formed a seal while dodging the attacks of the two sand ninjas. When he was in midair, he slapped the person next to him. Water escape wave technique. Instantly, a wave of water appeared, engulfing the man and directly rushed away with the three people behind him. With the help of this reaction force, Nawaki easily escaped from the battle circle and landed beside Ishigamihara. At this time, the male puppeteer stared at Ishigamihara solemnly, his eyes on the other's raised left hand. Then he saw that each of the 5 fingers of Ishigamihara's left hand had a thin chakra line, connecting to Nawaki's limbs and lower back. Puppet control. This car has chakra lines. For some reason, after seeing this scene, everyone in Sand Village felt a sinking feeling in their hearts. The Sand Villagers present were not weaklings, especially the leading man and woman, who were rare puppeteers in the Sand Village, and they were also elite puppeteers, and they knew best what the chakra line represented. It was difficult for ordinary puppeteers to control puppets with chakra lines, and it was even more difficult to control living people with puppets. Let's put it this way, if you count the puppeteers who can do this in the entire Sand Village, you can count them with 2 hands. And the puppet control technique is the secret of the Sand Village, especially this method of controlling living people, which is even more secret among secrets. But now there is a young man from Konoha in front of him, who can perform it so easily. Is the secret of the Sand Village leaked? The leading man and woman looked at each other and had this idea, but soon felt that this possibility was not high. After all, as a secret of a village, it is impossible to leak so easily. The most important thing is that it is difficult to learn this secret technique, and the difficulty is not low, otherwise there would not be more than 10 people in the entire Sand Village who can master this method. But the young man in front of them did it, and he did it right in front of them, which surprised them. The leading man and woman immediately thought, could it be that he figured it out on his own? So, they looked at each other and saw a solemn look in each other's eyes. This person cannot stay, must be taken away. There was no need for words, the two of them understood each other's intentions in an instant. Go. With a command, the male puppeteer rushed out first. The gecko-like puppet opened its mouth and spit out more than 10 kunai in one breath, heading straight for Ishigamihara. The female puppeteer was just as quick. The bat puppet went straight for the rope tree, and her movements were very fast. At the same time, she formed seals with both hands and took out a huge fan from her back. Summoning technique, ninjutsu, wind. Bang! A cloud of white smoke exploded, and then the female puppeteer swung her long fan violently. The next moment, a violent wind howled, and in the violent wind, there were countless fine wind blades, heading straight for Ishigamihara and Nawaki. The male puppeteer seemed to have expected it. He lowered his body, flicked his fingers, and shrunk under the belly of the puppet. The body of the gecko puppet rolled like a wheel, and sharp blades suddenly pierced its body, making it look particularly ferocious. On the periphery, the remaining sand village also attacked at the same time, each of them forming seals, and casting a number of earth escape sand weaving technique. The muddy ground dried up in an instant, and then quickly turned into sand. Blown by the strong wind, the scene suddenly became like a sandstorm, blocking everyone's sight. Such an environment is undoubtedly the most favorable for Sand Village. Ordinary ninjas can easily suffer in such a battle. But Ishigamihara is obviously not an ordinary person. He saw his fingers move, and the rope tree beside him did several backflips in a way that ordinary people could not predict. His body twisted in the air from time to time, and he easily avoided the wind blades mixed in the strong wind. At the same time, Ishigamihara made a seal with his other hand, his chest suddenly swelled, and then a surging wave spurted out of his mouth. Water escape water rush wave. Although this water escape ninjutsu is only sea level, it is an attack and defense at the same time, especially in this kind of it was even more obvious under the environment. Water condensed quickly around Ishigamihara starting from the ground, and then began to rotate and rise like a tornado, covering Ishigamihara's figure and tearing the air around him. Countless wind blades hit it, but only splashed a lot of water, and could not penetrate it completely. Crash! The gecko puppet broke through the rotating waves without any obstruction and rushed into them. But at this moment, the rotating waves suddenly exploded, and then turned into water splashes all over the sky. Amidst the roar, a small-scale rainstorm was formed, which directly dissolved the wind escape ninjutsu performed by the female puppeteer and the desertification storm. The male puppeteer's heart sank at this moment, because he had lost his target. It's on top! The female puppeteer shouted loudly. The male puppeteer was startled and wanted to look up, but it was too late. He felt an inexplicable pressure on his head. He summoned the puppet to himself without thinking. Boom! It was Rope Tree who came down from the sky at some point, raised one leg high, and stepped down fiercely like a battle axe. There was obviously chakra gathered on the sole of his foot, and he chopped the puppet like this. With a roar, the male puppeteer was hit hard, and the whole person and the puppet were stepped into the ground. Strange power, or it can be said to be the pain of the sky kick. Of course, it can't be compared with Tsunade's strange power, but when Rope Tree performed it, it was already extraordinary. The female puppeteer was about to make a move, but she was startled and turned her head to look, but saw that the few people who had just performed the ninjutsu had fallen to the ground without knowing when, and it was silent. How could this happen? He was so shocked that he didn't notice any movement, and didn't even see where the attack came from, but the few companions who survived had already fallen down. Are you looking for me? A voice came from behind the female puppeteer. At this moment, the female puppeteer felt a chill all over her body. She was alert after a long battle and saved her life. She turned sideways and rolled on the ground without thinking, avoiding the stab of a short blade. Ha! Ishigamihara's voice was a little surprised, but he smiled slightly. He chased after the female puppeteer like a spinning top, and the blade of the knife pierced the female puppeteer's throat with a unique rhythm. The other party's pupils shrank. Facing such a sword technique, she actually felt that there was no way to escape. Ridiculous. The female puppeteer was furious. The other party was obviously just a little ghost, but she was afraid of him. It was a shame. She didn't know that from the beginning, she had unknowingly fallen into Ishigamihara's fighting rhythm. Whether it was ninjutsu, physical skills, or swordsmanship, these were nothing. The most amazing thing about Ishigamihara was actually the control of the battle, which was the rhythm of the battle. Once he fell into his rhythm, Ishigamihara had many ways to win. Ishigamihara's swordsmanship is a combination of Uchiha-style swordsmanship, Konoha-style swordsmanship, and Senju and Uzumaki clan swordsmanship. He extracted the essence from them and formed his own unique style. Although he is not very old now, every time he draws his sword and every step forward, he has a unique rhythm. Facing Ishigamihara's attack, the female puppeteer was just surprised at first, but when she gradually fell into Ishigamihara's rhythm, her face changed again and again. In this case, other people naturally would not just watch and rushed over to help the female puppeteer, and at the same time launched an attack on Ishigamihara. But Ishigamihara had already anticipated this situation, and he was not afraid at all. He swayed his body and avoided the attacks of those people. The battle of ninjas must be accompanied by ninjutsu. These sand villages will naturally not hold back in this regard, especially their wind escape ninjutsu, which can play a significant role under this siege. However, their current opponent is Ishigamihara, which is destined not to let them get what they want. Ishigamihara's double glancing back and forth, those invisible wind blades were clearly seen in her eyes. She could always dodge them at a strange angle, while still chopping with the short blade in her hand, keeping the original rhythm. The most amazing thing was the one on Rope Tree's side. The male puppeteer had already escaped, and at this time the gecko puppet shrank its body again, turning into a wheel and rolling towards Rope Tree. But Rope Tree dodged easily, and at the same time, he could seal his hands and release ninjutsu. Don't forget that Rope Tree was still controlled by Ishigamihara's chakra line at this time. In other words, when Ishigamihara was besieged, he could not only ensure his attack on the female puppeteer, but also take into account the battle on Rope Tree's side. This ability to do multiple things at the same time was amazing. The older she got, the more frightened she was, especially when facing Ishigamihara's female puppeteer. Every time she wanted to make a move, she was quickly disrupted by Ishigamihara's attack. The anger in her heart can be imagined. The key is that the sand-hidden ninjas who besieged Ishigamihara were really horrified at this time. Who would have thought that such a young man could stop the elite of the sand village with his own strength? No one would believe it if they told others. Konoha's blocking team is coming back soon, you go over there. The female puppeteer shouted softly, her face was very ugly. Upon hearing the sound, the besieged sand ninjas quickly changed their strategy and immediately rushed towards the tent where the wounded were. The battle here has naturally attracted the attention of the wounded in the tent, but the wounded cannot participate in the battle at this moment. Especially in the wounded tent, there are medical ninjas. These people are treasures on the battlefield and cannot be lost. So Ishigamihara and his men have been fighting until now, and no one among the wounded has come out. The purpose is to reduce their presence and protect themselves and those medical ninjas. But now the enemy has obviously paid attention to them, in order to distract Ishigamihara. This move is very insidious, but very useful. Ishigamihara frowned immediately. But the next moment, a person rushed out of the tent quickly. He was a wounded man hanging on his left hand. His eyes were scarlet, and two magatamas were rotating in each of them. You move, I will stop them. This person was obviously from the Uchiha clan. Facing the rushing sand ninjas, he did not retreat at all. He formed a seal with one hand and spit out a huge fireball with a diameter of more than 2 meters. Fire style. Great fireball technique. The fireball fell to the ground and exploded with a bang, and smoke and dust rolled. Unfortunately, there was smoke but no injuries, and the sand ninjas had already avoided it. It seemed that this Uchiha had already anticipated this, and his purpose was not to kill, but to delay time. Seeing this, Ishigamihara had to speed up his actions. He was in the air, but his body was strangely bent. It turned out that he used the chakra line to make himself in the middle of the air. Kong moved and intentionally approached the tents. The female puppeteer naturally noticed this, and a sneer appeared on the corner of her mouth. At this moment, voices were heard from the periphery of the camp, and several people rushed in from a distance, covered in blood. They were the ninjas from Konoha. These people had obviously broken away from the battle in the front for the safety of the camp in the rear. When they looked up, they saw the situation in the camp and became very anxious. The people from the sand village were equally anxious. Seeing this, the female puppeteer became even more anxious and shouted, "Kill that guy, quickly." The sand village ninjas naturally knew that the situation was urgent. Without any hesitation, several people worked together and used their own methods to surround and kill the injured Uchiha in almost the blink of an eye. Well, the Uchiha groaned in pain, stretched out his hand with difficulty, and slashed a man's throat with a kunai, but he had no strength left and fell to the ground in an instant. A sand ninja was furious, and vented his anger by beheading the injured Uchiha with his ninja sword, and was about to rush into the tent. This scene fell into the eyes of the Konoha ninjas who rushed back, making them furious. But inexplicably, everyone present felt an extra pressure on themselves. This pressure appeared very suddenly, but it made people feel palpitations. The female puppeteer was startled, and saw that the boy in front of her had stopped at some point, his head slightly lowered, motionless. Good opportunity. The female puppeteer moved her fingers, and the bat puppet took the opportunity to swoop down, and its sharp claws grabbed Ishigamihara. "Yuan!" On the other side, Shang Shu shouted. He had already noticed something strange on his body. He narrowly avoided the attack of the male puppeteer and spoke in a hurry. The bat puppet's claws were shining with cold light, as if they could penetrate steel. It was about to reach Ishigamihara's head. But at this critical moment, Ishigamihara raised one hand. An inexplicable light red flame appeared on this hand, and it easily blocked the attack of the bat puppet's claws that could easily tear his body apart. At the same time, a light red chakra emerged from his body, with a sense of weirdness, as if it was ominous. Then, Ishigamihara looked up, with a strange expression on his face. "Got it, I will. I don't know who this sentence is for, but now the people of Sand Village can't help but be attracted to Ishigamihara. To be precise, they are attracted by his right eye. In the right eye socket, there is a scarlet eyeball with a complicated pattern on the eyeball. It is specifically manifested as a three-pointed blade, presenting a triangular symmetrical pattern in the shape of a calyx. And in his left eye, there is a piece of pure white, with a faint light blue in the white. One white and one red eyes, coupled with Ishigamihara's long hair that was moving without wind at this time, and the light red chakra burning all over his body, made him look quite weird. But the female puppeteer only felt her heart beating violently, and that kind of speechless uneasiness had filled her whole body. She spoke with difficulty, revealing disbelief. "Right, Sharingan. No, and Byakugan." At this moment, everyone who saw Ishigamihara's eyes was shocked, especially the female puppeteer, who was even more shocked. It was because the pattern of the Sharingan in Ishigamihara's right eye was not 3 Magatama, but a pattern she had never seen before. Inexplicably, the female puppeteer remembered the legend in the ninja world, the legend about the Uchiha clan, which seemed to have an ultimate eye technique that was superior to the Sharingan. Could it be that the kid in front of her was it? Thinking of this, the female puppeteer felt cold all over. Looking up, she happened to meet Ishigamihara's eyes, and she saw indifference in it. The next moment, her heart ached. The female puppeteer's body stiffened, and when she looked down, she felt that her strength was disappearing rapidly, and she inexplicably felt a sense of powerlessness. Plop! The female puppeteer fell on her back, blood gushing out of her mouth and nose, and blood gushed from her back and chest, and soon dyed the ground behind her red. She died silently and suddenly. At this time, the short sword in Ishigamihara's hand had disappeared, and was replaced by a beating heart, still with body temperature. Every time the heart pumped, blood spurted out of it. He shook his head, and the next moment, the heart in his hand disappeared, replaced by the original short sword. The female puppeteer died in an unclear manner, but Uchiha Izuna in Ishigamihara's mind saw it clearly, and his voice was full of surprise and confusion. "What kind of ability do you have? No, you opened the Mangekyo. How is it possible?" It was obvious that Uchiha Izuna didn't understand what she saw at the moment. Ishigamihara just smiled and said, "Nothing is impossible. Don't forget that I already have 3 Magatama. It's normal for me to open the Mangekyo when I was stimulated by your chakra just now." No, it's impossible. How can you do this? This is unrealistic. That's my chakra, not yours. If you want to open the Mangekyo, it's impossible without the ultimate yin-tun chakra produced by mental stimulation. Uchiha Izuna naturally didn't believe it, but the reality was like this, which made him extremely confused. Is it possible that what is needed to open the kaleidoscope is the extreme stimulation of yin-dun, rather than emotions? It doesn't matter what kind of yin-dun it is, as long as it can stimulate the opening of the kaleidoscope. As he said this, Ishigamihara smiled even more. Don't forget, you are in my body, and your chakra will also be manifested in my body. Uchiha Izunai understood immediately, and his voice was filled with indescribable shock. You, little brat, were stimulated by my yin-tun chakra to open the Mangekyo. But, if that's the case, shouldn't it be my Mangekyo ability? Why do you have a new ability? Ishigamihara heard this and his expression was a little strange. You are a senior who has opened the Mangekyo, but you can't even guess this trick. Uchiha Izuna's voice paused, but he quickly reacted. Yes, the reflection of the soul, you little devil, took advantage of my yin-tun chakra stimulation and directly took over those chakras, thus completing the opening of the Mangekyo and gaining your own unique abilities. I guessed it right, but unfortunately I didn't get the prize. As the two talked, Ishigamihara stepped forward, not even looking at the fallen female puppeteer, and walked straight towards the male puppeteer. The male puppeteer shouted at this time, his voice was shrill, and then his eyes turned red, his face was full of murderous intent, he directly abandoned the rope tree and rushed towards Ishigamihara. Hearing the voice, Ishigamihara's mouth curled up. It looks like you two are married. Sorry, I killed your wife. As compensation, I will let you cut me with a knife. Ishigamihara said, standing still and letting the other party rush towards him. The distance between the two of them was closed in an instant. The male puppeteer did not hesitate at all, and controlled the gecko puppet to open its mouth and spit out flames to wrap Ishigamihara. Be careful, Rope Tree shouted, and rushed over. Then a scream sounded, but the sound did not come from Ishigamihara, but from the male puppet. If you look closely, you can find that the male puppeteer soon has scars of burning from the flames, first on his face, then on his body, and the whole person seems to be on fire. Ah, how is it possible? No, the male puppeteer struggled quickly, as if to put out the flames on his body, but no matter how he struggled, his injuries continued to increase rapidly. In just a few seconds, the male puppeteer's body began to carbonize, and then he fell to the ground with a plop, and soon he was dead. On the other hand, the flames that enveloped Ishigamihara gradually extinguished, and he stepped out of the flames directly, without any injuries on his body, and even the corners of his clothes were not damaged at all, as if the flames that had just enveloped him did not exist at all. But in his mind, Uchiha Izuna was already terrified. What kind of ability is this? Izanagi. No, it's not Izanagi, but the principle is the same. You transferred the damage you suffered from yourself. Ishigamihara stood still and casually extinguished a wisp of fire at his feet, but did not answer directly. Very close, guess again. Brat, how many abilities did you get? 1 or 2? Uchiha Izuna asked. Ishigamihara replied, 2. He didn't hide this fact. One is the ability to transfer items, and the other is the ability to transfer one's own damage, right? Yes, that's right. Ishigamihara did not deny it, but directly confirmed it. As for whether it was true or not, only he knew it. In fact, Ishigamihara did obtain 2 abilities, and both abilities are in one eye, both in the Sharingan of the right eye. One is called Ashikami, and the other is called Huoshikami. The former is a time-space pupil technique, which has a similar effect to Flying Thunder God, but is more magical than Flying Thunder God. The specific manifestation is that wherever the line of sight reaches, 2 points can be used for space transfer, and this transfer is not only for oneself, but also for objects. Self-transfer is easy to say, it is nothing more than a Flying Thunder God that does not require physical technique coordinates, but the transfer between objects is extremely strange. As long as 2 target points can be determined, Ishigamihara can consume pupil power to exchange the items at these 2 points. The reason why the female puppeteer Mai died was that Ishigamihara used the short blade in his hand to exchange with her heart. Almost instantly, the opponent's heart appeared in Ishigamihara's hand, and the short blade in his hand appeared in the opponent's chest. It seems impossible to defend against, right? But in fact, there are limitations. First of all, there is the limitation of pupil power. For well-known reasons, excessive use of pupil power at this stage of the Mangekyo will lead to blindness, which is the curse of the Sharingan. Another point is that the two target points cannot be in motion. In simple terms, if the female puppeteer just shook her body, Ishigamihara would not be able to transfer her heart. So don't think that Yu Shishen's ability is very exaggerated, but as long as the spatial coordinates of the 2 points move a little, Yu Shishen's ability will fail. This also applies to transferring oneself. If Ishigamihara wants to transfer himself to a target point, he must first ensure that he is in a static state, otherwise the transfer will definitely fail. However, even if this ability is limited, it is enough for Lu Shi. After all, with his control over his body and his understanding of the human body, he can still catch the enemy by surprise in battle. The second ability, the God of Misfortune, is a kind of damage transfer, as Uchiha Izuna guessed, but a more accurate statement should be illusion reality. Its ability is not just as simple as transferring damage, but it uses the power of the pupil to construct a special illusion. This illusion will bind a target and thus fix its own state. During this period, any damage inflicted on Ishigamihara himself will be applied to the target by Ishigamihara's illusion. In order to achieve the effect of damage transfer, the prerequisite is that the other party must be hit by the illusion of the God of Misfortune, and the illusion cannot be broken during this period. On this basis, Ishigamihara can use illusion to reverse the state of both parties, thereby transferring the damage sold by himself to the other party. The strength of the illusion of the God of Misfortune is not as exaggerated as that of Tsukuyomi, but it is also extremely terrifying. If you want to resist the God of Misfortune, unless you can surpass Ishigamihara in pupil power, otherwise, you can only become the target of Ishigamihara's damage transfer. Both pupil techniques have limitations, but it is precisely because of this that they appear more real. Little did he know that Uchiha Izuna was extremely shocked at this time. He didn't understand how Ishigamihara opened the Mangekyo, and he only opened one eye, and the other eye still retained the white eyes. The Sharingan is stronger than the Byakugan, which is recognized by the Uchiha clan. It is precisely because of this that Uchiha Izuna is more curious and can't wait to know the secret. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this time, the Konoha ninjas who returned to defend had already arrived. Without any hesitation, some people killed the remaining sand ninjas. A crisis was resolved in this way. The scene of Ishigamihara killing 2 people was naturally seen by the Konoha ninjas who returned to defend, especially the Sharingan and Byakugan, which shocked everyone. The appearance of these 2 eye techniques really responded to Ishigamihara's thoughts, or to be more precise, it was a reflection of the soul. Yu Shishen was an eye technique born by Ishigamihara for the mobility of ninjas. After all, the ninjutsu he wanted to learn the most was actually the Flying Thunder God technique, but it was a pity that it was difficult to access for the time being. And the eye technique of the disaster time was born by Ishigamihara to ensure his own safety, but it was a pity that the eye technique born could not really ensure his absolute safety as Ishigamihara thought. However, with these 2 pupil techniques, Ishigamihara's own safety has been greatly increased. Next, he should find a way to ensure that his Mangekyo is not blind, but for the time being, it seems that it will take time and opportunity to do this. Ishigamihara is different from the orthodox Uchiha, who has 2 fingers of Sharingan. He only has the Sharingan in his right eye, and the Byakugan in his left eye. This time, the Mangekyo was opened because of Uchiha Izuna's chakra. Because of the Uchiha wounded who was beheaded, Uchiha Izuna's own chakra had an explosion. Ishigamihara seized this opportunity and directly activated the point of his Uchiha bloodline with the ultimate Yin escape chakra, thus completing the opening of the Mangekyo. But the left eye did not complete the upgrade. No. To be precise, the left eye has indeed been upgraded, which is the upgrade of pupil power. In other words, the purity of Ishigamihara's Byakugan is far beyond that of the general Hyuga clan. Although there is still a long way to go before the Samsara eye, it is also very rare. The Samsara eye is the counterpart to the Rinnegan. According to Ishigamihara, if his left eye wants to awaken to the Samsara eye, the key is to improve the pupil power. From this point of view, his left eye may be one step ahead of his right eye. After all, although there are not many ways to improve pupil power, they do exist. At least it does not require the harsh restrictions of the Sharingan, and it is necessary to exchange the eyes of a loved one. Regarding his two pupil abilities, Ishigamihara naturally would not tell Uchiha Izuna. It is normal for ninjas to hide some secrets. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.